Welcome. I know it's early on a Thursday morning as we head into this holiday weekend, and I think this is a great place to start. There are a lot of tournaments going on, a lot of league games, tryouts, all that sort of stuff. So I'm really excited about this. Is our fourth installment of kind of our webinar educational workshops through Trace. But I think this is a great time of year to bring up this really, really important topic. Today, we're going to talk about how to strengthen mindset to elevate soccer skills, our mental game. And the good news is that it's not just going to be me talking, but I'm really excited to introduce a good friend of mine, one of the co-founders of Soccer Resilience, in Matt Spear. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Matt, I'm sure many of you are. His soccer resume is extremely impressive. He led Davidson to the Final Four in 1992. He was the head coach of Davidson for over 20 years, which is a very, very good academic and athletic Division I school in Carolina. President of the Richmond Kickers of USL, and is recently the development ambassador at Charlotte Independence, who was also a Trace Club partner. And he is also, which is kind of how we crossed paths and we ended up here on this workshop, is he's the founder of Soccer Resilience and Love United FC. So Matt, welcome.
How about that, starting with the mute? Thank you, Tim, and good morning to all. It's not that early here in North Carolina. It's 10:30, by the way. I know you're out in the Midwest.
It is a little early, but yeah, I think the topic that we're going to discuss, from both former athletes and coaches, I think this is a really important time of year to bring something like this up.
Yeah, somebody told me in youth soccer recently that this is the best and worst time of the year for youth soccer, and there's so much decisions made and roster changes, and sometimes people shifting clubs, etc., which can be super compelling, stressful, and just people got to take some time, take some breaths, see what's best for their life and their career, so to speak. But we're going to talk a lot about mindfulness and the importance of mindset, being both a great player and in well-being off the field.
Yeah, and I think this time of year, especially this year, with coming off of COVID, we've got the NCAA recruiting dead period being lifted. That's going to heighten a lot of expectations, a lot of performance anxiety, all that sort of stuff as we go here into the summer. So this is perfect timing. So let's go ahead and let's jump in. And I know we have Jurgen Klopp up on this side. I don't want to offend anybody. I'm sure there's some not Liverpool fans out there, but this quote is extremely important. And I think this really will set the tone as we discuss a little bit more. What's your take on mental skills in the game?
Yeah, you can blame some of these slides on me, if you will, Tim. You can just distinguish me on choosing some of these quotes and slides, and whether you're a Liverpool fan or not. I think that the quote there, it's now on your screen, give you a chance to read it if you haven't. No coach is perfect, and certainly Jurgen's not perfect, but he does have tremendous experience and passion, both as a player and then quickly turning into a successful coach. I really feel the focus to me is on the word joy, and remaining joyful and optimistic and positive, recognizing that failure and losses and hardship are part of the game and part of life. But we can steer our mind, and we actually can do very practical daily tools and strategies to continue down a path of growth. I know we'll talk about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset here soon, but there are so many ways to take control and remain optimistic towards the next play, the next day, the next game, the next opportunity.
And I think the other part that I really like about this, you're right, is that joy, and that even though as players and as coaches we do make mistakes on the field, it can't change how we feel about it. It can't change our passion. And the more that we enjoy what we do, the more that we enjoy our game, regardless of the competitive level that we're in, the better we're going to be. And I think it's great when you do see players, and you can tell those players that are struggling to get through a game, regardless of that game context, versus those players who are excelling and who are really enjoying that particular match or training session, or what have you.
Yeah, and like you, Tim, as you said before, I was a longtime college coach as well, stepped away 2 years ago. And, we talk about recruiting, we talk about what's a good look and a bad look. And when you're being recruited, I know there are recruitable age players and parents and coaches that are involved in that kind of teenage age group to think a lot about what do I look like and how to I get evaluated in a good way. And there's all the skills and tactics and athleticism, but what coaches really want to see is the proper demeanor. Is
Yeah.
this player going to achieve and be poised under stress or when things don't go his or her way? So I know body language is a piece we'll probably cover in one of the slides. For me, as a college recruiter, I did it for 18 years at Davidson and a few more years beyond that as an assistant, but 18 years as a head coach. Is so many of the players were very similar, technical, tactical, athletic. And so I really started to focus on the intangibles, is how they react when the coach pulled them off the field, or how they react and respond when they missed a shot. Were they looking forward to the next play? Did they have a good reset? Did they emphasize the team first? So all these things really impact your recruiting advantages as well.
No, I agree. I've always said it's easy to go to a field and pick out the best players. I mean, anyone can do it, but it's really difficult to differentiate those players who can be better and can project when they're 16, 17 to when they're 20 and 21. And a lot of that is based on their mental resiliency, or their mental skills, their mental approach to the game, not necessarily the tactical and technical um, aspect of it. Um, so
Yeah, absolutely. Are they going to thrive in the next environment? Are they gonna really double down and embrace a challenge? When they go a goal down or a man down, we all face that individually and collectively as a team. Coaches have to be really conscious of the mood of the team, the mentality of the team.
Well, I think that's a great way to kind of introduce growth mindset. The those type of players who do embrace kind of the adversity, the difficulty, embrace it with joy, and continue to grow. And so we've got a lot of text up here on this slide. But what's your take on growth mindset?
Yeah, it's been a term. It's been around for a while, and one of the kind of pioneers of it, so to speak, is Carol Dweck, Dweck. Maybe Charles, you can type that into the chat. She wrote the book literally called Growth Mindset, and for me, gosh, it was almost like our Bible at Davidson College. I mean, we printed that thing and talked to players about it, and everybody has both a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. But as you can imagine, those with a growth mindset are going to be able to embrace challenges. They're going to see life not as a straight line, but as a process. They're always going to be seeking learning and improving. They're going to recognize that losses or hardship can be opportunities to really grow a lot. And actually, great teams and great people thrive through adversity. So that's really what growth mindset means to me. A few bullet points there for the coaches that I really emphasize is we one of our taglines of soccer resilience is more than an athlete, and it goes with that first line: people first, athletes second. We can get caught up, and I'm sure you did, Tim, as a coach, almost being too serious about the X's and O's and the win, the lost, and all those things. If we forget that these are just people that we are actually trying to unify and create a kind of a spirit and a power that can really be the better of the parts. And so, as much as we do all this work during the week, and there's nothing to take from the great work that coaches do on the technical, tactical, and athletic side, But I feel that those are kind of like the hardware, and then your mindset, both individually and collectively, is the software. And so we have to combine those two things because we've all seen it in ourselves. Me as a player at Davidson is fortunate to be on a Final Four team, and me as a coach, and me as a pro president. I've seen these great players that I played with, or coached, or identified being so good in practice with all this skill set, but then when the game come along and one little bit of adversity hit them, they weren't able to respond.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about growth mindset, we're looking at those kind of opportunities and challenges to really rise and respond.
I think one of the things that I always did, whether I was coaching in college or youth, and no matter how big my roster was, and in some colleges it can get to be pretty big when you're dealing with well over 25 players. And before each session or each meeting or anything, I always made sure that I had eye contact and even a quick conversation with every player there. And it could have been simple as how was class, or something like that, where I let I let those players know, one, I was human, right? I think we kind of get a bad idea. Like, players sometimes don't think coaches are human, but it also let them know that, what, you're more than just an athlete, and we're more than just coaches. And so those quick little hellos, how is your grandma doing? I saw her at the game. Those sort of things are really important. I think go a long way in developing trust. And this trust that coaches can develop, I think, really kind of nurtures that growth mindset, so players can take risks. So they don't fear failure, because they know the one person who is the leader is still going to catch them, and help them continue to grow and not be safe, or sorry, to be safe, where they continue to grow some more. um, the other kind of interesting thing I've always talked about is the difference in coaches between training and games. And were you always the same in each of those two environments, Matt?
It's hard. I mean, the game just brings this a different kind of aura, energy about you, right? And I was pretty level headed. Wasn't the type of coach, screaming and breaking clipboards and getting red cards on the sideline. Some coaches are, and they feed off that maybe in different ways. I tended to try to watch and listen and celebrate and try to retain just the support, because the one thing we love about soccer, right? It's a player's game,
Mhm.
and the coach's time is really in the training sessions. And I love what you said earlier about just coaches being more relational and being less transactional. It's even if there are pro coaches watching this and these players are making a lot of money, they still are going to get nothing out of their players if they don't have some kind of common denominator, something they can talk about separate from the sport. So staying relational, being a mentor, being an advocate. You don't have to be their best friend, coaches, but you need to have a mutual respect. And if you open up a little bit and become a little more authentic and vulnerable, they're going to attach themselves more to you as well. So tell them, not only ask your players, like Tim said, "Hey, how's your grandmother? Is she doing better?" Or how did your sister's game go last night? It's also tell them a little about yourself, coaches. My son had a great game last night, or hey, want you guys to know that my mom's a little sick right now. So if I'm a little bit quiet today, it's because of that. Just letting your guard down is really an important aspect of modern leadership.
Where do you think, what are the best kind of strategies for coaches can't that need to balance, this kind of hyper competitive edge with the teaching and learning? Is there something that you did? And kind of on a side question is, I think as coaches, we're getting constant awareness of the generational differences in the players that we coached versus when we played the game, and how do you balance that? Like, I think there's a really bad reputation or bad misinformation that this generation of players is soft. And so how can you as a coach balance all of those things?
Yeah, that's a terrible term, soft. I actually
Yeah.
don't agree with that, and I understand what you're saying, Tim, because a lot of people do that. I would say they're more emotional, and I mean that in a good way. They're more self-aware than people our generation and older tend to be. They're okay talking about their feelings. They recognize that the world's not perfect, and they realize that life's kind of hard, right? And we learned that, gosh, through a pandemic, all this uncertainty and negative surprises and isolation has really challenged us in so many ways, mentally, team wise, school wise, business wise, etc. So I feel like, it's kind of a cop out for adults, our generation, to say that, and so we have to really prevent that by putting ourselves as much as we can in the player's shoes, realizing what he or she is going through, not expecting them to be perfect as a result. Unless you're a pro coach in the audience, these are not pros, and even pros have a lot of hangups. I work with professional athletes as well, and they have just as many challenges as youth players do. They're just
Mhm.
overgrown kids, is what I call them. And so it's so important to recognize that, yeah, a youth player, a college player, a pro player, they have stuff going on, and we need to treat them as people first, more than athletes that we're talking about. Um, I think, you had a good example, Tim, to open up a little bit and also ask them how they're doing. It could be through a short text. It could be checking in with them before they get to the field. It could be pulling them aside. Are you okay? Is anything going on? Making yourself vulnerable and available. They may not open up to you because a lot of players love their coaches and a lot of them necessarily don't love their coaches. That's okay. But don't be a robot. Be someone that has a warm heart, that smiles and has some fun out there. It's a player's game. Keep reminding ourselves of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how I think this is probably the most exciting time to be a soccer player in the United States. I mean, there's so many great things going on, from the MLS to the NWSL and USL and all the great leagues out there, and the amount of coaching education that is being required within clubs and leagues. And I also think from our particular standpoint, from video and video analytics, but also from the mental skills, like, now every pillar can be addressed. Everything is now within a player's reach. And it's funny, you hear a lot of pro athletes always say, man, I wish I was had this growing up. I wish I knew about all these mental skills and approaches that would have helped me be a better youth player, be a better collegiate player, and be a better and be a better pro player.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Wells Thompson, who's a Soccer Resilience co-founder with me. He was a great player at Wake Forest and fifth pick in MLS, a 9-year pro and MLS Cup champion. And he told me this story, and probably told you as well, Tim, when y'all spoke, that when he was at Colorado Rapids, they offered him a free session with a psychologist. It was one session, it was free, and that's all he did. And he regrets it so much that if he just wished he had taken those opportunities more and thought about his mental game, whether it be talking full on to someone that's a professional or just thinking about it and processing in a different way, because he carried so much stress about winning and not starting, and his career, and all these things that he really couldn't control. So I was talking to Brant Bronico yesterday, who came through NC Fusion, which is a Trace club in North Carolina, played at UNC Charlotte. He played 3 years in Chicago. Now he's Chicago Fire. Now he's with Charlotte FC on loan for Charlotte Independence, while Charlotte FC takes 1 year before they launch MLS next year. And I talked to him for an hour yesterday about a lot of these things. And he said, Matt, before you even get started, I've read your stuff. The number one skill I have is my mind. It's not my technique. It's not my athleticism. It's not my tactics. Those are all important. The number one skill I have is my mind. And I thought that was so compelling, that a pro would admit that. And he works on it every single day and thinks about it, and seeks help and asks questions. And so we're not alone on this journey, and it is becoming more normalized. The stigma around mindset and mental training and even mental illness is starting to be more talked about. And that helps with pros at all levels opening up more about their own mindfulness practices.
And you're right. It is a skill that needs to be practiced every day. You can't just flip a switch and be mentally resilient 10 minutes before you kick off. Something that has to be part of your your daily routine. It has to be part of your coach. It has to be part of your it has to be an integral part of every session that you do, whether that's a video, a video classroom session, or whether it's speed and agility, or whether it's just a recovery, or whatever it is. It has to be incorporated in everything that we do, so that when that moment is there within the game, not only are we successful, but we keep on building upon that. And
Yeah,
yeah, so
absolutely.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tim. I think when I work with teams, youth and otherwise, I always started with, is your mental game important as a player and a coach and a team? Like, yeah, of course, Matt. Okay, so how important? What do you mean, Matt? Like, well, you have a big game Saturday. What percentage of playing well and winning the game is mental? And usually the average answer, when they verbally or in the chat, is usually like 70%. I'm like, okay, so are you investing 70% of your resource and investment and training on this piece of it? Like, no, we're not doing anything. And we talk about why and the stigma and not knowing how to do it. And but that's compelling to me that it should be integral and vital in connection with everything else you do. Talk about that hardware, your technique, your tactics, and your athleticism. Can we fuse kind of the mental and emotional game into that? And I think maybe the next slide, when you're ready, we'll talk about a little bit about those practices and processes of dealing with mistakes and otherwise.
Yeah, let's move on here. So let's let's talk about mistakes. And I think this is probably maybe the number one biggest mental challenge, I think, for not only for youth players, but even college players and pros.
Yeah, I think that the real key that we have to kind of do a brain shift, so to speak, is to recognize that setbacks and failures are part of life. And same thing in soccer. So players, you're gonna have a bad first touch. You're gonna miss a shot. You're going to get beat on a 1v1. So just accept that. It's hard to say that, even for me to say that as a former coach and as a former player, but we all have to just say that out loud and process it and recognize that the game is going to have so many moments. And one exercise that Dr. Brad Miller does when he works with teams, he's one of our Soccer Resilience co-founders, he's a psychologist. He says, mom and dad with your kid, watch their favorite team, whether it be Liverpool or Man United or Real Madrid or Carolina NC Courage, whoever it is, and watch the mistakes. Like, you don't think about the mistakes, and all these players make mistakes and how they respond and react to a mistake and how they quickly push on. And so I think just recognizing that we make mistakes, that's the most important thing, that setbacks are part of it and failure is just part of life, and not trying to be perfect and not trying to pretend that we're perfect and not trying to say we're always perfect. We're always in a great mood. We always had a perfect game. It's okay to say, I could have been a little bit better, but that's all right. That's just part of life. Um, that second bullet point there, just to throw a little bit of sports psychology 101, brains are wired to fixate on negative things. So why that is the number one job for your brain is to keep you alive. And so it's always very defensive mode oriented. That goes back to the beginning of civilization and mankind, is that, we had to fear being attacked or being hurt. And our brains are wired to protect ourselves. And that's called threat mode. And there's also a thing called fight or flight, what we do when we handle those kinds of stress. The problem with the brain is it gets our wires get crossed, and it can take something like missing a penalty kick or getting pulled out of the game when you're not ready or not supposed to be, coming out of the game, what have you, or a red card. it gets that into threat mode when it should just be challenge mode. It should be just, okay, this is part of it. I got to handle this. And so the brain is wired to the negative, and it influences other things. And so the biggest thing we can learn from that is it's not necessarily the situation, it's how we explain it to ourselves. It's called self-explanatory style. So for example, one thing off the field I always tell students is if you fail a test, do you tell yourself, I'm stupid? Or do you tell yourself, you know what, I just need to study a little bit differently? You see how those go through two different paths, and you actually can make that choice. If you go down the road, I'm stupid, that's a fixed mindset, and you can't get out of that, and that will take you down a rabbit hole. A growth mindset is, I just didn't study the right way, and I'm going to learn from that experience, and I'm going to go to my teacher or do better or whatever I'm going to do to kind of learn from that opportunity. So I think in soccer, one of the slides that I always show teams I work with is the U.S. national team on the bench and their body language. And I say, okay, let's put yourself in that situation. Let's say on Friday's practice, Coach Tim says you're starting, and then you get to the field Saturday and he walks over and says, hey, I changed my mind. I'm starting this guy or this girl. And he walks away. What do you do? How do you respond? And every player I've talked to and given that exercise, they go, I am crushed. I think the coach is an idiot, or I have no role in this game, or I stink. And none of those are true. He just had to make a decision. He may not be able to explain it all the way, but you don't stink. He does have a plan. You still have a role. So a lot of it is how we handle mistakes, how we handle setbacks can really take us down one path or another path.
And you're right. I think that kind of goes. I know it's on the next slide, but this self-talk, this kind of reframing of an event, whether we dwell on the mistake or whether we kind of point ourselves in a different direction, is extremely impactful. And the hard part, and maybe we can kind of flush this out, is for instance, a player makes a mistake in a game, bad first touch, loses possession, team starts to counter, and maybe the result is a goal or something, right? What advice do you give players to say, what to say to themselves? What sort of strategies can they begin to reframe that and let them move on, as opposed to just kind of being stuck in the mud?
Yeah, I think we're probably gonna talk about affirmations and self-talk and how you respond to setbacks. And there's a whole theory about reset. And there's so many different ways to reset. But one thing that some people will do is they'll have an affirmation or like some kind of mantra they'll say. And for example, it could be next play, good or bad. So let's say you're a striker and you miss two or three shots. Does your head get down, or do you look at the sky, or woe is me, and the body language goes, and you're probably going to not really recover very well, are you? Or do you keep your eyes level with your teammates? Do you pat yourself on the chest, or do something like next play, I've got this, or hey, my bad, guys, let's go, whatever it is. Same thing when you lose the ball. From a coaching standpoint, we often talk about that. Tactics is if you lose it, you become the first offender. But if you
Mhm.
get your head down and you suffer in in this pity party, you're not going to be able to help your team, and your team's playing a man down or a woman down. So it's really important just to realize that it's okay. Move on to the next play. One of my heroes outside of soccer is Steph Curry. He went to Davidson. I went to Davidson. And one of the beauties about Steph Curry is he can miss his first six shots, Tim. He doesn't blink an eye. Seven shots, taking it. No hesitation, because he knows that it's only the next shot that matters. And that can also trigger seven consecutive shots he's going to make, right? So it's not looking backwards. A lot of, for lack of a better term, depression is based on things that happen behind us. And a lot of anxiety is based on things that may happen in front of us. But we don't control the past or the future. We only control the present. And that's where mindfulness and exercises therein come into play. So when you hear pro athletes talk about mindfulness and what they do before a game, when they focus on their breathing and they have positive self talk and they visualize themselves doing success, they're setting themselves up to be able to be poised and make plays.
How do you think coaches can? I mean, we referenced, kind of generational differences with current players. how do you think coaches can coach through mistakes to fix, to what sort of balance do you think they can? I mean, we've all played for coaches where, each mistake we make is the whole world is falling down, and then we start to fear and we go into a little safe zone. And then we've all played for coaches who are very, hey, take this risk and
Yeah.
let's see what happens. What advice can you give to coaches to find that balance?
Well, one thing, and the parents as well, and I'm a parent, you're a parent, is the term shout praise, whisper criticism. We should never be yelling criticism. Really shouldn't, because it's putting it out for the whole world. You're isolating a mistake, and everybody else can hear it. Players know they messed up, and we don't want them to fixate on it. And if we yell at them for that mistake, it's just going to broaden that aura or orb around them in a bad way. Can we shout praise? Great. Can we also focus on the process versus the product? So that would be hustle plays, getting back on defense, grit. Those are things I think a coach should applaud more during the game, and not necessarily just the decisions. Decisions are something you train up to the game, and then you got to stand back. We don't have a joystick, coaches, that we can do a chess match. All right, the players have to be on the other side of the white lines, and we're here to support them during the game. Same thing as parents. They shouldn't be yelling at players when they have the ball at his or her feet. Quiet. They need calm. They need to make decisions and trust themselves. And if they mess up, that's okay. We make decisions all the time, and it doesn't always go well for us. Um, Also, not to make a generational thing, but as a college coach, I remember one of my assistants critiquing a player in front of the whole team, and it crushed that player. And we had a really hard time bringing that player back into the fold, because I coach men, but I know it happens for women as well. We really care about people, what they think about us, and our peers is really important. So if we critique a player in front of the whole group in a harsh, negative way, it's going to have a lot of ripple effects. And that's going to put the player maybe in a little bit of a hole. So I think shout praise, whisper criticism is one thing. And then the other thing is body language. I was far from perfect, Tim. I'm sure sometimes on the sidelines, got angry or got upset. And I would encourage coaches to think about their body language, because when players do make a mistake, they may look over at you, or the bench is definitely going to look at you. And can you remain calm and look to the next play? That's so, so important.
Yeah. And no, yeah, it is. We forget that maybe we're coaching up one particular player, but it's never done in a vacuum. Everything has ripple effects in the team. There's always it, and I think we forget that. But yet there are times where coaches, well, I'm going to send a message through this player, and that not messages are kind of like that telephone game. They kind of get distorted with each individual that ends up creating their own narrative. So I do think I love that advice about shouting praise and whispering, you know, criticism. I
Mhm.
think that's an ideal thing too.
And you had a bullet point on that last one about no lectures, particularly after games. Players don't want to stick around after the field for a long time, and it's something that we hit our head against the wall too much as coaches. They want to move on, whether they played great, they didn't play, whatever it is. They want to get about their day, and that's even college players and pros. They want to move on in life. So, just when you bring them in, if it's a cool down stretch, applaud two or three good things that happen, and say, "Look forward to seeing you tomorrow, the next day, and we'll learn from this and we'll move on." Don't try to break it all down or talk about the mistakes or over focus on the result. Applaud some good things, recognize some positives about the effort, the attitude, performance, compliment players, and push on. Don't need to be critical right after the game. Don't need to be long winded either.
Um, what do you and that kind of builds into how can we do this for each day and for each game? Just as you mentioned, coaches not having an extremely long lecture after the game, but kind of refocusing them as the next steps. How can we do this for individually?
Yeah, we recently had a soccer resilience post. I think you may have seen it, Tim, and it challenged coaches on three intentions.
Mhm.
One was, what's your purpose? What's your why? So why do you coach? Not a paycheck. What is it? Could be you love the game, you love helping the sport, you love building a team, you love impacting youth, whatever it is. What's your why? Make sure you know that. It could be more than one. Two is self-care. Make sure you take care of yourself, coaches, because if you're not well as a coach or a parent, as a leader, you really can't influence others in a good way. So make sure you take care of yourself. And third is from that first slide is treat your players as people first. And so I think those are three intentions that coaches could probably focus a little bit more on than just X's and O's and just wins and losses and just looking good and thinking they have the best training session in the world, or maybe it didn't really elevate and impact the players. Um, I think when we get into the next slide, we might be ready for it. We'll go into some tools and strategies for getting mentally fit. We could talk about different ways both players, parents, and coaches can do that. Um, so the folks can take a second to read a little bit of the copy on that page. And Tim, I'll let you point out one or two that you feel are vital.
I mean, I'm a really big proponent, and I mean, self-talk to me is, I think it's really the vehicle of our mind. We talk and we tend to follow what we say. So being able to have key phrases, reset phrases, or key phrases that refocus us and bring us to very specific controllable actions. And I don't think a lot of players do this. I think a lot of players fill their minds with negative self-talk or expectation talk. Like, I made this mistake, therefore this is going to happen. Or they get into mind reading mode. I make this mistake, and then they start looking over and see who's warming up to come in, as opposed to getting back to that present moment. So for me, it self-talk definitely drives the bus. And the other strategy that I love to employ is a game script, where particularly on the older players, as they begin to rehearse their game, they prepare for adversity. A lot of the times players just, they visualize scoring a goal in the World Cup final, or Villarreal's final penalty yesterday, right? And they forget that the game's not going to always play out perfectly. So the more that you prepare for the positive and the adversity, the more stable your confidence is, and the better result you're going to have at the end. And just as importantly, too, I feel that even if the result of that game isn't in your favor, because you've prepared in preparation for that adversary, the next one is going to, it allows you to recover quickly and no longer dwell. So those are kind of those are definitely my big two. What are your kind of keys?
Those are great, Tim, and you've got tremendous experience both as a player and a coach and a mental performance coach as well. And so I love those. I think reset phrases. I got this. Next play. We're good. Whatever it is, individually, collectively. I love when teams have like kind of themes or mantras. Brotherhood, sisterhood, relentless. Champions. Some kind of thing they can rally around is really, really helpful. I think, we have plus or minus 50,000 thoughts a day. And that's what psychologists say. It's racing, racing, racing mind. And for me to be able to slow that down, that's what the greatest athletes and performers can do. It doesn't matter if it's the NBA finals or the World Cup final. They're just locked in to this skill and they've done it thousands of times. That's all they do. The best way to steer your mind is through your breathing. No question. It's been proven for thousands of years. And so I meditate. I encourage it. There's lots of other ways you can practice mindfulness. I just finished a 30-minute mindfulness session before this call with NC Fusion, a Trace Club for their staff. I do this with pro athletes and youth athletes. And it's so easy to do. It's just focus on your breathing. You can do it for 1 minute. Just take deep breaths in and out. It'll slow your mind down. It'll declutter what you're worried about, and it'll focus on your intentionality. So if there's one kind of trick I could tell both players, coaches, and parents: when you get to the field, stay in that car for 1 minute, or stay in the locker room for 1 minute, or go off to the side of the field for 1 minute and just take some deep breaths. And I think everyone will be surprised how that may be able just to help them find their center. I would do it with the Davidson College team. We would do it during our pregame meal. So if we played at 7 p.m., we have a 3:30 p.m. Pregame meal. At the end of the meal, I'd say, "Okay, guys, put your trays away, come back. Let's get mindful." And they close their eyes, work on their breathing, and I would talk about visualizing a play or a moment in the game, and then they leave. And so they are going on that track towards some kind of intentional success.
Yeah, I do. I think breathing and visualization is often overlooked, especially in younger players. I think we feel that they're not at the maturation standpoint or the emotional intelligence to make it useful and practical, and therefore I think a lot of coaches don't introduce it, or maybe they're not aware of how to introduce it or when to introduce it. And I think the earlier players become engaged and engrossed and trained in mental preparation, dealing with mental adversity, mental toughness, mental resiliency, the longer their careers are going to be and the happier they're going to be in their careers.
Yeah, and so many teams. Like I have a 13-year-old son. He plays AU basketball, and he'll be like, "Who do you play this weekend?" He'll tell me the team. Like, "Oh, I remember them." He's like, "They killed us," and then their whole team's going down this mantra that we're gonna get killed again. Whoa, whoa, whoa! That's in the past. You guys are better now. Like they could be worse. We don't know who's going to show up on that day of the game. This is a brand new day. This is a new opportunity. There's no ordinary moments here. So we self defeat ourselves, or the other way around. We crushed a team in that tournament last weekend, right? We're going to play them next week. We're going to crush them again, right? Don't assume anything. It's That's the beautiful thing about soccer. Every game is up for grabs. Relish that. Get excited about competing. Get excited about your team going on there and being really unified. There's just one thing I'll give you. Someone gave it to me, and I'll pass it along to coaches. I used to do sometimes in the preseason, and I would take a pencil and I bring it in the locker room and I give it to the biggest, strongest guy in the team, college player. And I say, "Hey, Tim, break that pencil." Like, "All right, coach," you break it. And then I give him 11 pencils with a rubber band around it, and it'd be all tight. And I'd give it to him. I said, "All right, Tim, break that one." He tried to break it, couldn't do it. I'm like, "See, that's going to be our team. If you guys believe it, when we're on the field, it's not individual game, it's a collective. So when we attack together. And we defend, oh my gosh, tooth and nail. We are tough to break down." And so if you have that mentality, gosh, you can move mountains, you can beat anybody. And that's the greatest thing about soccer, is it's about that team mentality. So when we're talking about individual mentality, that's the foundation of it. And then it grows from there into a team mentality. And sometimes it can reverse, where the team mentality is so strong, it builds up the individuals. So it goes hand in hand.
Of the teams that you've had, was there one particular team that you felt was mentally more advanced than others? Was there
When
one?
I was in it, I didn't know all this, and so I've removed myself from coaching. But I do remember and feel that there were teams that had it more than others. I wish I knew all these things, and so I wish I was a young up and coming coach that maybe listening to this call that may go read the book Growth Mindset. When he's a 20 something versus me, and so I feel, I was fortunate when I coached at Davidson. We had 10 wins over ACC teams. The only reason I mention that is we were never the better team, on paper than those teams. They had more funding and full scholarships and big resources and national team players. But we went in with a David versus Goliath mentality,
Mhm.
and we went in with a chip on our shoulder. And I remember one game at Duke where we didn't play great the first half, but we did all right. We were still in it. And I remember walking in at halftime. This is at Duke, Koskinen Stadium, and just laughing and smiling, like, we're going to win this game. And I absolutely believe it. And I just threw it out there, and I kind of was faking it, and they believed it, and we crushed it in the second half. So it's just what you feel and believe. And that's just, you channel greatness versus succumbing to weakness.
You're right, and that's kind of that second to last bullet point. Thought drives feeling, drives action, and it's
Yeah.
simple.
You can take control. Absolutely.
I agree. Um, so kind of the last thing, as we kind of pivot, but it deals with, I think, not only daily preparation, um, but with, making mistakes and visibly seeing mistakes, is we know that the game has grown, especially in the youth space, and there is a lot of not just video, but analytics a part of development. And in your experience with coaches and with players, how can players best use something like Trace, like, the player performance data, the playlist? How can they not just get mired down in the negatives?
Yeah, I mean, video, it's, it exposes us and it lets us see ourselves doing good and bad things. And so I feel like the world of analytics should be another piece of the teaching opportunity for coaches and players. Um, and I think as a coach, it can strengthen your case, right? If I'm talking to a player and his name's Tim and I'm saying, hey, you're always cutting inside, and we want you to go down the line, and we show 3 or 4 videos of that player cutting in when they could have gone in a wider area to get a better service in, it's helpful. And then that player can see that and then work on that step over or work on that first touch to take him or her down the line. So video can, I think, articulate what the images that the coaches are trying to express. And I think every person learns differently. And for some, metrics and analytics and video and images are so much more powerful than words. And so I think it can really complement what the coach is working on. And there's some science behind Trace and otherwise to study, what you're doing in the game and where you are in the game and how little or how much you run. And there's ways you can gauge your input, physical input, and your technical capacities that are going to elevate, what you do and how you do it.
No, I do. I think it's, again, I mean, I do. I think this is a really exciting time to be a soccer player in the United States, and also a coach in the United States. And the one thing that I remember as a player, going through the old VHS stop and start kind of video analytical sessions, and as it progressed through my coaching career, is I remember a lot of these sessions became very emotional. That, there that video was a way to blame players. And what I see with coaches and players now is that this is video is unbiased. It's a way to look at your game very constructively without maybe an emotional, often negative input, and allows me to kind of grow on my own and learn on my own and self coach, which, as you and I both know, the more a player takes control of their development, the better they get, the faster their growth accelerates it. And so I think now player performance data, any type of analytics, Trace, the individual playlist, this is a really great positive for players to be able to control and interpret without bias their own performance. I think this is a massive step forward for us.
Yeah, and it's so much easier for coaches. You talked about VHS days, and you have these services that do it for you. That's the best thing. So then coaches can focus on what they can control and not spend so much time on the film breakdown, et cetera. So it's a great thing for coaches and for parents to help the kid and for the kid to the player to self assess. And I think in this age of YouTube, video is such a driver, and people feed off seeing themselves do good things. So we don't want to just focus on the negative plays, focus on the good plays and make your highlights and envision yourself doing that over and over and over again. Making that right move, making that right pass, winning that header. So you're actually creating positive images that you're visualizing, and what you think you're more apt to do, and you start to feel that, and so your motor skills kind of follow your mind. In other words.
I agree. Yep. It's Yeah, it's exciting. I just keep on going back to that. But before we kind of wrap up and look at some questions, Matt, can you give us a little bit more information about soccer resilience?
Yeah, so website's right there. It's basically mindset training. So all these things I've been talking about is harvesting your mind to be the best player that you can be. The fact that you can take control through things like self-talk, visualization, breathing, finding your purpose, and that's going to channel more perseverance. It's going to enhance your performance. It's going to just affect your well-being as a person on and off the field. So soccerresilience.com. We do mindset training sessions for teams and clubs. We do demonstrations for entire clubs and organizations. We do one-on-one mentoring and training. And the really neat thing is, in about a week or so, we're very close to our launch date of this thing called Soccer Resilience FC, which will be an online academy, and it'll be a library of all these mental training exercises that we do with teams through Zoom and in person. It'll actually be an online academy that you'll be able to subscribe to as an individual or as a team, as a club. And that way you can go back to what we talked about, and you can print it, or you can take a screenshot and bring it to the field, or a coach can say, hey, that soccer resilience session last night that I wanted you guys to read, we're going to practice that and talk about it in this game this weekend. And so it's helping we have segmented content for players, coaches, and parents.
I think that's great. And I think it goes hand in hand with exactly what Trace is about. Here are all these unbelievable tools available for players to not only continue to review their game, but build up different different pillars, right? The technical, tactical, physical, and psychosocial, all in their control. And yeah, this is, and that's why I do like this. I like this combination of soccer resilience and Trace. So
Yeah, it is. We talked about kind of the art and the science of the sport, and you got a little bit of both of that, right? But they do absolutely overlap. And with soccer resilience, we always talk to pros, and what are you doing, and what are you working on? So Wells Thompson, 9-year pro, wish he had these tools, and now he's pouring himself back into our content, our sessions with players. And Jessica McDonald, who's a World Cup champion, plays for the Courage in the WSL. She's one of our co-founders. Walker Zimmerman was our first ambassador that we announced, 2020 MLS Defender of the Year. So players at the top level, they want to pour themselves back into the youth and college levels and say, hey, the reason I got to where I am is because of great people giving back to me. And that's what we're trying to do with you, Tim.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. Charles, do we have any questions here? I know we're coming up on our time.
I think we are out of time, and I think you guys covered everything. But if anyone has any questions, email Charles at TraceUp or Tim at TraceUp, and we'll get those questions answered. We'll send you the presentation, and this will also be up on YouTube right after this is over. So yeah, I think we're good.
Well, good. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for joining us this morning, mid-morning, early on the West Coast. I thought it was great. I'm walking away a much better coach and person because of it. So I do thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. You're welcome. And thank you as well for having me.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate all the time from everyone. If you want to learn more, obviously traceup.com and soccerresilience.com, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.